In this video, I will be going over how to identify the number of significant figures, also known as sig figs, of a given value. Let's start with some basic examples. So let's start with dealing with significant figures of non-zero numbers. What everyone needs to know is that when you're dealing with numbers that do not have a zero, then all the numbers are considered significant figures. So let's say we're given 325, 43, 8, and 4,684. So let's do the first one. How many significant figures would 325 have? Since none of these numbers here are zeros, all three are considered significant figures. Let's do 43. 43 has two numbers that aren't zero, so it has two significant figures. 8 is just one number. That's not a zero, so it has one significant figure. And 4,684 is four numbers that are not zeros. Therefore, we have four significant figures. Let's move on to numbers with zeros in between. Numbers that have a zero in between any non-zero numbers are all significant. Let me show you. Let's say we have 204. So there's a zero in between 2 and 4, but we know that 2 and 4 are non-zeros. Therefore, all of this are significant figures. Therefore, we have three sig figs in this one. So let's move on to 102, 9,004, and 49,021. So, how many significant figures would 102 have? So there's a zero in between the digits 1 and 2, which are non-zeros. Therefore, all of this is significant. So we have three significant figures in this one. How about 9,004? So we have two zeros in between, but we have a 4 and a 9 around those zeros. And that makes all of this significant. So we have four significant figures in this one. So how about 49,021? We have a zero in between, and we have 4, 9, 2, and 1 surrounding the zeros. Therefore, all the numbers are significant. So we have five significant figures in this one. Now, let's move on to numbers with trailing zeros. Here are some examples. We have 1,200, 500, 3,980, and 100,000. When you're given these types of numbers, these are all classified as numbers with trailing zeros. The zeros at the end of a number are called trailing zeros and do not count as significant figures. Therefore, we only use the non-zero numbers to determine how many significant figures are in a value. So, with 1,200 here, our non-zeros are 1 and 2, and our trailing zeros are these two right here in the green. So, they do not count as significant figures. So our only significant figures are 1 and 2. So we have two significant figures in 1,200. For the next one, our trailing zeros are right here, and 5 is our non-zero number. And 5 is significant, so we have one significant figure. Let's try 3,980. So our trailing zero is right here, and these three digits are non-zeros, so they are all significant. Therefore, we have three significant figures in this value. For our next value, you can see we have 5 zeros here, but they are all trailing zeros, which make them insignificant. And our only significant value is this non-zero, which is 1 in front. Therefore, this value only has one significant figure. Let's move on to trailing zeros with decimals. Here are some examples. Let's say we're given 1.5 thousand with a decimal, 1.5 thousand with a decimal point and 2 zeros after, 120 with 4 zeros after the decimal point, and 125.10. So, these examples here are trailing zeros with decimals. When dealing with decimals, you deal with the zeros differently. So for 1.5 thousand with the decimal right here, it has a total of 4 significant figures. So all trailing zeros with decimals are considered significant. Therefore, all numbers with trailing zeros that have decimals are significant. Let's try 1500.00. So since we know that all numbers with trailing zeros that have decimals are significant, we can identify our decimal right here. So all these zeros right here are considered significant. So we have a total of 6 significant figures for this number. So on to the next one. How many significant figures are here? So we have a decimal right here, and all trailing zeros that have decimals are significant. So this 0, this 0, this 0, this 0, and this 0 are all significant. So we have a total of 7 significant figures. How about the next one? So we have a decimal right here, and we have a trailing 0 right here. So we have a total of 5 numbers here, and this decimal makes it so then all 5 are considered significant figures. On to leading zeros. Here are some examples of values with leading zeros. So 0.005, 0.0132, 0.0000453, 0.9101. These values have zeros in front of the non-zero numbers, which is why they are called leading zeros, since leading means in front. Leading zeros are all non-significant. So for 0.005, our non-zero right here is 5, so that one is significant, but we have zeros in front of the 5. Those are all called leading zeros, and they are not significant. So in this case, we would only have one significant figure, which is the 5. For our next one, 0.0132, these 3 numbers are our significant figures, and these zeros are the leading zeros, which are not significant. So we have 3 significant figures. For our next one, we have these 3 numbers that are significant, and all our zeros in front, which are not significant. So we have 3 sig figs for this one. So how about the next one? For this one, we have this value right here, but as you can see, there's a 0 in between. But as we learned earlier in the video, the 0 in between 2 non-zero numbers is significant. Therefore, all 4 of these values right here is significant. The only thing that's not significant is this leading 0. Therefore, our answer is 4 significant figures for this value. Here's a list of some simplified rules to help determine the number of significant figures. Feel free to pause this video and write down or memorize these set of rules. Now, let's go over some practice problems to review what we have learned this video. Let's say we're given 6,032, 206, and 0.00005. So for 6,232, how many significant figures are here? So there are no zeros, so we don't need to worry, and it is 4 significant figures, equal to the amount of numbers in this value. On to 2. So 2 is a non-zero, so it's just one significant figure. 206 has a 0 in between, but as we learned earlier in the video, a 0 in between two non-zero numbers is significant. So all 3 of those numbers are significant. So we have 3 significant figures. How about 0.00005? Right here are our leading zeros, which are not significant. So the only thing that's significant here is our 5. So we only have one significant figure for this one. Let's try a few more. Let's say we're given 2,000, 4,500.00, 100 with a decimal point, and 0.0505. So let's start with the first one. How many significant figures is here? So we have 3 trailing zeros, which don't count as significant values. So our only number here that's significant is our 2. So we have one significant figure here. On to the next one, 4,500.00. Since we have a decimal right here, it makes all these trailing zeros significant. So we have 6 significant figures in this value. On to the next one, 100 with a decimal point. Since there's a decimal point right here, these 2 zeros will become significant. Therefore, we have 3 significant figures for this one. On to the last question. So we have a 0 in between here, and we have 2 zeros right here, which are leading zeros. So they are not significant. And with a 0 in between here, we have 2 non-zeros, 5 and 5, that are around that 0. So that 0 is considered significant. Therefore, we have 3 significant figures in this as well.